To begin this next session, we should agree that controlling one's impulses is a highly valued learned skill. We should also agree that learning those skills is a lot harder for someone who has experienced trauma or other adverse childhood events. Just like there are three ways to experience life, the cognitive, affective, and behavioral domains, there are three avenues to acquiring impulse control skills. Let's collectively call those impulse control skills self-regulation and describe the three approaches as behavioral self-regulation, affective, emotional self-regulation, and cognitive or thinking self-regulation skills. You'll see that when we possess good self-regulation, we're using all three domains at the same time. The first, easiest, and most effective domain for most people to build self-regulation skills is behavioral, through intentional body awareness and breathing exercises. These include things like deep intentional breathing, stretching, yoga, meditation, and all other behavioral things that we can do that we wrap up and call, interestingly, mindfulness. It's a good example of how self-regulation integrates behavior, cognition, and emotion all at the same time, but in this case is induced through a behavior, breathing. There are physiological and neurological reasons for this seemingly simple approach, and collectively we call them parts of the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. A little anatomy. We call the brain and brain stem the central nervous system, and we call all the thousands of other nerves in our bodies, from our face, neck, internal organs, arms, legs, hands, feet, and skin, the peripheral nervous system. All those thousands of nerves in the central and peripheral nervous systems work in two different directions that we call efferent and afferent. Efferent is when the brain is sending messages to the peripheral nerves, and afferent is when the peripheral nerves are sending information to the brain. When potentially risky stimuli come into the nervous system through one or more of the five senses, those peripheral nerves will send an afferent message to the brain that they perceive danger, and the brain will send out an efferent message to the entire peripheral nervous system to respond in its automatic protective ways. Both happen instantaneously and outside of our conscious awareness or control. Among other things, this means that your stomach will stop digesting food, your heart rate and breathing will increase, and the hundreds of blood vessels in your peripheral nervous system will do one of two different things. To your extremities, your head, your arms, and your legs, the blood vessels will get smaller, called vasoconstriction. To your chest and your thorax, including your lungs, your diaphragm, and your heart, the blood vessels will vasodilate or get larger. This happens instantly, and you experience this as the flush you feel when you feel threatened or angry, when your hands get clammy and you struggle to think straight because of the vasoconstriction of blood vessels into the cerebral cortex, where your reasoning skills are. We think this is evolutionary because running short distances or lashing back furiously were the only defense mechanisms that early humans had when we were just part of the food chain. Scared humans who reacted quickly survived, while calm and relaxed humans got eaten. Human beings today have been naturally selected to be the most alert and anxious than all humans before them. That's the mechanics of the primitive, ill-named fight or flight mechanism. It kept us safe when we were living in caves, but brains evolved much more slowly than modern society has developed. That complex set of automatic responses we casually and inaccurately call the fight or flight response is part of what neurophysiologists call the sympathetic nervous system. It's called that because the Latin root of the word sympathetic means in response to. So the sympathetic nervous system responds to the perception of risk or danger. When the fight or flight response calms down, as can be induced through deep breathing, the brain sends an efferent message to the peripheral nervous system to calm down too, and we call that calming response a parasympathetic nervous system response. Remember, the sympathetic nervous system response is automatic. You don't have voluntary control over it happening. When you were a small child, when all those nerves were being laid down and connected, If you witnessed a lot of violence, or if you were put in dangerous situations, or if you were left to fend for yourself a few times, even if you don't remember it, your body used this sympathetic nervous system response, or what we commonly call the fight or flight mechanism, to stay alert and protect itself. And it got programmed into you. Now, as an adult, you won't be able to unlearn it, but you can learn to understand it and to begin to respond in different ways. You do have some voluntary control over the parasympathetic or calming response. Intentional mindfulness, things like stretching, moving, and most importantly, deep regular breathing, slowly shuts off that fight or flight mechanism. Within a few minutes of breathing deeply, most people experience what we call a parasympathetic response, including the heart and lungs returning to stasis and the head and extremities getting back to their normal blood supply. In short, intentional breathing and body awareness exercises, what we collectively call mindfulness, is an interaction between behavior, intentional breathing, emotion, calming down, and cognition, gaining voluntary control over your thinking. There's no more effective long-term tool than mindfulness to gain control over one's impulsivity. Mindfulness doesn't have to be just breathing and relaxing. You can also be mindful through lifting weights, running, push-ups, anything that induces a parasympathetic nervous system response.